It's the Ask JP podcast with jpmorrell. Now, let's start the show. Here's JP.
Welcome to the Ask JP podcast, where Monet and I tackle the questions and issues of the day. Today, we're super excited to have with us Dustin Granger, who was the most successful of the Democratic candidates for statewide office. And we're just to hear his perspective on what it was like running for office. Monet's going to have the questions, but really to go into kind of like what worked, what didn't, and what's the future of our party. So with that, I will toss it to Monet really quickly for the first question. We're going to get right into it, Dustin.
All right, yeah. I'm ready.
And as I was telling Dustin before we started, questions is a strong term, just having conversation generally.
Yes, conversation topics.
Yeah. But like JP said, you were one of the top performing Democrats this past election cycle. You were also one of the only Democrats who called for the resignation of the Democratic Party chair. So I don't know, talk us through that. Like, how did you, because that was once you had gotten into the runoff, how did you get to that decision to make that public statement?
It was a lot of frustration that started earlier in the campaign. I had been the longest running Democrat because I really started almost a full year ahead. Yeah. I didn't officially announce until I think March, but I had started like the previous November or December. So I just didn't feel like after a long period of time, I didn't feel like there was much help there. And I knew that going into it. We didn't expect that there would be much help. But as the campaign was going and we started getting into the heat of it, I was on the trail a lot, especially with Sean. And we were kind of frustrated by a lot of the unnecessary distractions, especially to do with Mandy Landry's seat and some other things that we felt like was causing a lot of distractions that shouldn't have been there, because it was obvious to me that Mandy was very popular, progressive. She was looked up to for people all around the state. And it felt like the chair, Katie, was using the party to go after and satisfy her personal vendettas. And that hurt all of us because it was hard enough running statewide with little resources, little help. And then you had that big distraction. So that was one thing. And also, I would say, our teams would meet after a while. Like we were told there would be a lot of weekly meetings, but we didn't hear anything for months. But once it got going, I think after qualifying, they were having weekly meetings where our statewide teams would call, and we just got word from my team and from some of the other teams, like, what are they doing? Like they asked simple questions, couldn't get an answer. There was like talk of a plan, but like they were asked to show parts of the plan, wasn't there. And also, I would say I was really frustrated too, because some of the few things that I asked of the chair, it's like she couldn't do it, or she wasn't giving a lot of help with that. I felt like there was other people behind her really making decisions, and she wasn't able to do things that a chair should be doing, like connections to the DNC or just connections to the people up above. And I felt like she didn't have that conduit towards that. I was told to, you got to make nice with certain people that were the gatekeepers, and that wasn't going very well, even though I tried. So I just felt stuck. And then whenever the primary was over, I was kind of left there without Sean at the top of the ballot. And then it came to where, I guess, we didn't have the state party didn't have any money And I felt pressure from the Democratic leadership to like, hey, you got to try to raise money for them. I was like, well, we're just trying to raise our own money to satisfy our own needs. And it's hard enough. Like, we're not able to do that. Why can't y'all do that? Y'all have a lot of connections up above. I will help wherever I can, but I'm focused on raising my own money.
But that's, I mean, to your point, all your instincts are 100% correct. There is no universe in which a candidate currently in an election should be asking for money for the state party. In a functional party, as a candidate, the party should be raising you so much money that they get your overflow. The whole purpose of a party or any of these third-party PACs is when you are full of money, the money then goes to the PACs of the party to do third-party stuff to try and help everybody on the ticket. But it's kind of surreal and asinine and backwards to say, if you can't max out a donor, you should then ask that donor who you can't max out to, I also need you to give money to the party. And, I mean, just looking at your race, I mean, from your returns, two things stood out to you. One is there were a tremendous amount of people that voted for you, and you were on the middle of the ticket who didn't vote for people on top of the ticket. And what that tells you as a Democrat is the party's not unified, because everyone who voted for you should vote up and down the ballot for Democrats too, which they did not. The other issue, which I'd love for you to speak on more specifically because it pissed me off, is when I knew from talking to people that were working with you, you were getting zipped from the party as far as help, yet the night of the primary, they took credit for how well you did. And honestly, in that moment, I was like, wait, I know people were in Dustin's campaign. They didn't do dick to help Dustin. The people that they did help up and down the ballot got obliterated, whether it was at the top of the ballot with Sean or even in these, like you said, these hatchet man rep races where they ran Democrats against Democrats as part of some like misguided effort to deal with grudges. They got obliterated, and the people that did well, who they provided no resources to and no help, they acted like they were running your campaign too. And I'm not even you, and I was bothered for you. Just to be honest. What did that feel like on the day after the election, after you said you asked all these questions, you tried to get resources, none of it came, and then after everybody got blown up, they were suddenly doing a victory lap saying, but Dustin Granger did better than anyone would have thought. I mean, what did that feel like in that moment?
That actually didn't bother me because, like, I'm a part, I care about the party. I care about Louisiana Democrats. Whenever I'm out there, on the stump, I wasn't just talking about myself. I was talking about, hey, we're Louisiana Democrats. We're the jobs party. We're, we have a lot going for us, a lot of advantages, and tried to rev people up. So I want whatever success that I was having, even though it was lacking largely, I wanted it to go to the state party. I wanted to help the state party. If I was able to raise millions of dollars, I would have helped the leadership of the party do that. I just wasn't able to. And, to be honest, we didn't expect to have any help from the state party. We knew that there was a lot of troubles. I've been around for a few years. A couple of years ago, I ran for state senate. So I knew that the problems in the party, and that's one of the reasons I ran, is to help the overall party. And I think some cases they did try, like the Lexi and Amber that works at the party. They were on the ground with us a lot, and they were doing a lot of work. Didn't really see much of the leadership many places, but they were doing work. So I was thankful for that. But
you are a better man than I. I'm going to start with that. You are a better man than I. You are a magnanimous person who looks at the brighter side of things, and we need more people like you running for office. What I find interesting is that your race is a perfect example of why the party needs to really be reformed from the bottom up, and B, why we can't have grass movements with financial backing like you had for Stacey Abrams in Georgia and Beto in Texas.
Yeah.
And I say that, and I mean that if a party supports a candidate and wraps their arms around a candidate that can be successful, it lifts the party up. I mean,
Right.
You can't discount the work Stacey Abrams did in Georgia, and a lot of that was done outside the party there too. She had her own organization that promoted getting people signed up to vote, getting voter engagement up, and though it was kind of a separate from the party, there was a synergistic fit that they worked together. Beto, when he ran for Senate, governor's race, but that was a separate sad pile. But when he ran for Senate, it was interesting because with the party and the candidate pulling together, they engaged voters who got excited about voting Democrat again. The missed opportunity this cycle was, it's sort of like the Saints on a bad year. This was going to be a rebuilding year for Democrats anyway. This is a year where our goal was to put up respectable numbers and use it as a foundation to build from. And just the level of disconnect and discombobulation on the party level, they not only didn't support candidates like you that could have gotten voters excited, they didn't have a plan as to how to increase voter engagement anyway. One thing Monet and I talk about all the time is when you look at states like Louisiana, the Obama voters were the high watermark. This is when, even though Obama didn't win Louisiana, young voters, older voters, disengaged voters showed up for hope and change. That's the high watermark. It is reflective of our party, and Obama's a great metric because the fake Democrats who are truly Republicans didn't vote for Obama anyway. So Obama's numbers that's the high watermark. When Democratic engagement goes off a cliff since then, it is increasingly frustrating for me to hear politicians and the party blame voters because it's not their fault. They're disengaged and disillusioned. We have not given them a platform or a reason to be engaged.
Exactly.
And in your race, there were candidates like you where there could have been an effort to re-engage voters to get them excited about something. And it seemed to me as an outsider who was not in this cycle, there was not a statewide plan for anything. To your point, I'm glad you didn't expect support going in because there wasn't going to be any, but that in itself is kind of the sad state of the party. When you go into a statewide office and go, I have to create the entire infrastructure whole cloth because I know the group tasked with having an infrastructure has none. That is so incredibly sad.
Yeah, and you mentioned fundraising. Fundraising was really, really hard. It was harder than I thought it would be, and I thought it would be hard. My state Senate race, I raised enough. We had a lot of trial attorneys that came in and helped. But this race, nobody could give a damn about treasurer. I mean, I really had to. I was cold calling people basically almost every day for a full year and just scrounging small donations. Got a few max outs, but we raised, and I was shocked that we raised $450,000 by the end of it because it just felt like I was struggling every day. So, most of our, I had some good lists, and most of our solid Democratic donors were completely absent. I left, 10, 15 phone messages on a lot of, nobody would talk to me. And that it's hard to raise money. I think the same was happening with Sean because he was having a hard time raising money. Does that mean, people just gave up and didn't think a Democrat can win? A lot of people told me, well, they don't really care about treasurer, but I was telling them, like, look, this is not just about treasurer. This is about having Democrats in a statewide office at all. And Treasurer, I can really fight for economic issues because we can win on these issues. Republicans are weak on economic issues, which is a big, one of the, I think, main reasons that Democrats are losing so much in the state. We've ceded the economic lead to Republicans. So this was, I tried to sell that, hey, this is a strategic hill for Democrats, where if I got in there, I could really influence a lot of the people and in the media, so we can seize back that economic lead. But a lot of people said, Sean, a black man can't win statewide. I heard this probably more in the black community saying that. But people
That's 100%. Well, I mean, you look at it was difficult going into that race because you had two previous African-American black guys run that were congressmen, and they both did fairly poorly. Better than Sean did ultimately, but they did poorly. But I don't think it was just that. I'll tell you, like locally, and Monet can speak to this, a lot of people have just felt the Democratic Party on principles has really watered itself down to a point they're not engaged anymore. I can tell you as someone, and I know you listened to the Linda episode, but like on abortion, the fact that our Democratic governor literally did an interview, a week ago, Monet, being like,
and said, no regrets, no regrets,
no exceptions to rape and incest or life of the mother. Like, that messaging, when you talk to Democrats who might have been interested about a race like yours, like, here's a seat we can win, they're so disillusioned with our party just kind of stands for nothing. I go to other states and talk to other friends who are candidates nationwide. And if there's engagement on the party level, at least there's fertile ground for you to raise money. Like, they may not care about treasurer, but on these principal issues that Democrats care about, you can differentiate yourself from your opponent. Like, when it comes to unions, Democrats are pro-union, Republicans are not pro-union. Like, they're just certain like benchmark issues that make voters who appeal to that area go, well, I don't care about treasurer, but Dustin's pro-union, I'm pro-union. These are the hallmarks of our party. We're on the ropes in the state citywide, but we've had over the course of multiple, even pre-John Bell, honestly, even like during the Jindal years, on issues where Democrats should have been united and said, this is the line, this is who we are a big tent. We are the party where everyone's invited. But just like you invite your crazy grandpa to Christmas dinner, just because he's invited doesn't mean you agree with him, and doesn't mean you have to point out where the rest of the family is versus crazy grandpa.
Yeah.
And we're a party where not only is crazy grandpa invited, he gets drunk and we give him the mic. And and it's created an environment where younger voters or progressive voters or moderate Republican women, for example, who might be like, you know what, Roe v. Wade went the wrong way, I got to relook at Democrats. When you look at John Bell saying no regrets to rape, incest, and exceptions, and life of the mother, and you're like, well, might as well vote Republican then, because the two aren't different. If the two aren't different,
why would they vote for Republican light?
Right.
If we're ashamed to be a Democrat, if in our state, if we're ashamed to be a Democrat, then why would they trust in us or believe in us or what we want to do? If we label ourselves a Democrat and can't even act like a Democrat or stand up for those same values, which values, the Democratic values, we've done all kinds of polls. I've seen all kinds of polls throughout our state. Like, our platform is popular. The Democratic platform is wildly popular.
Well, if we adopted our own platform, it would be wildly popular. It's just that we don't even want to adopt, like, when it comes to gay marriage in Louisiana, everyone is okay with gay marriage. When it comes to, like, I call it the Ohio line, when it comes to viability, life of the mother, rape, incest, everybody is for what Roe v. Wade was. Now, on the upper end, there's some issues, but like everyone's for where things are at. When it comes to, like, for example, making college tuition affordable and not being draconian to college students or loan forgiveness, all these things that are popular Democratic issues, the party has no stand on any of them.
Yeah, ITEP. ITEP is a big issue. Insurance. Nobody agrees with the Republican platform of just giving more money to insurance companies and watering down our rights.
Oh my! I mean, I can tell you,
and they're standing up, and we didn't even run anybody against them.
Like, to your point, like we had a Republican walk into the insurance commissioner's office who does his first interview after walking in and goes, "My solution is to raise your insurance rates." That's literally a solution. I'm going to raise all your rates, and by raising them, the company's going to come back and they're going to make it cheaper and less profit because there's more of them. And I'm reading that and I'm going, but to your point, we could have run a Democrat against them. That Democrat still would have lost because they wouldn't have articulated the platform correctly. But
right,
it's just, we have to get to a place where I call it like the principled loss. If we stood up for what we believed in and we lost that race, then people would look at what we said we'd do, what they would say they would do, and judge us and grade us by that. The fertile ground that got John Bell to the place beyond having horrible opponents was that Bobby Jindal was so ridiculously unpopular because he did all the things he said he would do. He got rid of the Stelly plan. He did a whole bunch of other unpopular political things that were Republican things. Like, he anti-union, anti-teacher. He did all the stuff he said he would do. And Democrats said, we're not for any of that. That, combined with a terrible opponent who underestimated him and some softening of the field, created the fertile ground for someone like John Bell to be successful. Was his abortion position important to it? Probably at the time. But
yeah, it was different pre Dobbs.
Right.
Yeah.
But times change and parties have to evolve with it. I mean, you're seeing across the entire Midwest and East and some of the West itself. After Dobbs, this is now a bright line. Like, are you for access or not? And for people who believe that towing this weird line saying, I'm not really for anything, that only worked pre-Dobbs. Pre-Dobbs, you could be soft on everything and everyone would be like, well, I like that Republican or that Democrat. I mean, they won't say where they are, but it doesn't really matter. We have Roe v. Wade. After Dobbs, it's, oh, hell no, where do you stand on this issue?
I knew that would be a big deal, because, whenever I was running a couple years ago, pre-Dobbs, it was such a big, albatross on our back, just because the Republican Party has really been building their party for 40 years around this.
Yep.
And the Democrats are basically just playing defense. Like, we really didn't have any offense on it. So they had us playing defense constantly, where no matter what answer we gave, they were going to use it against us. But now the tables have turned. Now we need to play offense on them because now they caught the car.
Yeah.
And
dog caught the car.
Yeah, and people don't agree with it. So we need to be on the attack immediately on them and make them pay for it.
And I think, to y'all's point, my mom, who is an avid listener of this podcast and will probably text me once she sees this episode, says, you talked about me, but she was a lifelong Republican, grew up during the 80s with Reagan, from the West Bank, just like was a Republican her entire life, but for the most part voted for Democrat, voted for Obama both times, voted for Hillary. But post Dobbs, she was like, oh shit, I can't stand with this team anymore. Even though I voted with the other team, there's like an identity crisis at this point. So if we can't say who we are as a party, let's start with saying what we're not. What we're not is a forced birth state. What we're not is an anti-gay marriage state. I think if we can just start and just, rather than trying to include your drunk uncle in the conversation, say, okay, drunk uncle's here, but we're going to turn down his mic while we talk about stuff that actually matters.
Well, I mean,
and
go ahead, Dustin.
Go ahead, JP.
You're the guest. You go.
Please.
Well, I was also going to say, so, we're talking about, social issues, which are very important, but we still cede the lead to them on economic issues. So you're going to have a lot of people around the state, well, Democrats are liberal, with money, and I was saying on the trail that Republicans for a long time have been benefiting from the random word association that conservative has with saving money, because people always like to say, well, I'm socially liberal and I'm fiscally conservative. That's so common because it makes sense in people's mind. Well, nobody wants to say they're liberal with their money or they're bad with their money. You know what I mean? But it doesn't mean that. Republicans have no economic policy. The only policy they have is trickle-down economics. Just giveaways to their big donors at the top. Starving the beast, which is their real strategy, to where we're starved of revenue so they can cut everything that they don't like, which are investments in our future, in our state, in our people. And this is wildly unpopular. People, when you explain trickle-down economics, the white people in every area of the state, additionally, a lot of them that vote Republican say, no, that's crazy. We disagree with trickle-down economics. But the Republicans get away with it by using race dog whistles to scapegoat the poor, to make people think that it's the poor people that are lazy that are taking their money, not the giveaways to the wealthiest. So I think that's a key issue in our state too that we need to fight on. And we
But to your point, Dustin, I mean, there's a great singular example of that. When you poll Obamacare, everyone hates Obamacare. When you poll the Affordable Care Act, everyone loves it. It's the same damn thing.
Yeah.
It's just that when you color code it with the first black president, everybody dog whistles and goes, oh, we got to blow that thing up. Most of the people on the Affordable Care Act in Louisiana are not black. They are poor people who are white. And when you look at these issues, like, that's why I said with Jindal on the Fertile Ground, Jindal did everything Republicans said they should do. He starved the government of revenue. He caused $1 billion shortfall, and they started cutting stuff. And as you recall, Dustin, everyone was like, wait, you're cutting all these programs that I said I didn't want because I didn't know they were there, but now they're gone and my life's not great. The problem is that there's a reason why when you have an organized opposition party, it is one of the best places to be when you're trying to rebuild your organization, because you get to point out Republicans have a supermajority in the House and the Senate, Republican governor. Whatever they do, they're all going to vote for, and it's all going to be unpopular. If you're out there saying this is not what Democrats stand for, we don't stand for X, we don't stand for Y, and you make them own it, that's how you rebuild your party. Even today,
yes,
as our state party chairperson is out there, doing her thing, trying to stay in office, in the time she's been there, she's never attacked a singular Republican policy I've ever seen. If she has, it must have been between her governor ads. But I've never seen her actually say, this is something like when you saw what happened with trans kids, when you saw what happened with some of the budgetary maneuvers they did the last couple of years that were awful. Where was our party chair? And you know what? I'll go beyond Katie. Where were our party chairs out there messaging to the Democratic base saying, this is what they did? Even when John Bell ran for governor, he ran a race similar to yours, where he ran a race outside the party. Now, fortunately for him, because of his background with trial lawyers, he had a whole mechanism of raising money. He had a background with sheriffs. But he ran as a governor and won outside the party. that is why, in a lot of ways, I would argue some of the ideals that had to be compromised to get him there may have not had to have been compromised with a fully coherent Democratic Party. But he was running by himself. If we had a party that stood for something, that identified all the things that Republicans do that are antithetical to Democratic principles, there are a whole generations of people that are looking for somewhere to land. And I could tell you, and Monet, who's my resident Zoomer, right now, they don't feel like the Democratic Party is where they want to land because they don't know what it stands for.
Yeah, I was just talking to some, I went to an event in Lake Charles here a week or two ago. I was running into people that came up to me that, I didn't really know and said, I really was following your race. One of them was, he was in his early 30s, and he reached out to me and said, I've never really been interested in politics. I don't belong to a party. But I really like what you were saying about poverty in our state. And so that's the kind of thing. There's so many people younger that are progressive, that aren't tied to a party. This is a chance that we have, like everything you said, we need to be a great opposition party. We need to secure the under 45 age groups. I'm 43 myself. So really, I'm kind of at the edge. People younger than me, because I'm like an ex-zennial, but people younger than me are becoming, I saw a stat the other day that millennials are now the biggest generation in the workforce in all of America. We have a very high young population in our state. Millennials especially, are now participating more. They have families, their careers. People are getting more engaged. This is our chance to get them and make sure they stick with Democrats for the next 20, 30 years. We can build this party. And we have a chance. We can't, because if we don't go after them and we don't get them in our party and behind us, we could lose them now or down the road. So this is a big opportunity that we have right now. And
well, I mean, and to your point, Dustin, I mean, and this goes back to one of the formative races for me, which you'll appreciate because it actually was in your neck of the woods and not mine, was Don Cravens versus Bustani for Congress. And this was years ago. We were both in the legislature together. Our followers are both old and crazy together, but I really looked at Don Cravens as kind of the metric for what happens when you get a very well-meaning, good Democrat who is a Democrat but presents well to moderates and to even moderate Republicans. And he got obliterated by Charles Bustani. And I remember it happening because we have those stupid report cards in the legislature about, guns and birth and whatever else. And he had A's on all the cards. A's with the gun people, A's with the pro-life people. He had A's across the board. When he ran against Charles Bustani, they took the entire National Party platform and planted it right on his face. Said, we're going to define you as a Northeastern liberal who believes in third trimester abortions. And he got obliterated. And two things came out of that for me. One is the politics on the federal level for Black Democrats outside New Orleans is brutal and rough. The other issue is that the party even then had a hard time defining itself because it was still, Mary Landrieu was still in the Senate. Everyone had this idea of, well, if we just don't say what we're for, everyone will think we're for everything. And in that race, he did not define what made him a Democrat. He was trying to be as soft as possible to be attractive to Republicans. And that race, for me, really was indicative of kind of where the party was going, and I mean badly, in that if you don't define yourself, in politics 101, if your opponent will not define themselves, 101 is you define them. You go and say, if a person won't talk about, if you got an opponent who, let's say, is a person running against you and has a very terrible voting record on supporting public housing. You don't wait for them to come up with some clean version of why it wasn't awful. You go and say that person hates public housing. If a person is, you see it across the country right now with Roe v. Wade, where all the Republicans in moderate areas are trying to like dance around what they are now. If they voted for 30 years to repeal Roe v. Wade, you don't let them tell you that they didn't know it'd be this bad. You go and say everything that happened, that mom in Texas right now who was being forced to carry a dead baby to term that was dying, you define them. They've been doing it to us for generations. And because as a party, we could not create a platform that said, here is what a Democrat is, we let them label us with whatever was unpopular. And even when things popular happened, when we had infrastructures come down from Obama and Biden, you saw Republicans cutting the ribbons who voted against all of it. Where was Katie Bernhardt when Garrett Graves was cutting a ribbon on a flood program project he voted against?
Right.
That's 101. That's you go and pay for the billboard in their district saying, I did not want this bridge built. And they built it anyway. And I'm such a hypocrite. I'm here cutting a ribbon. That's what they would do to us because they're smarter about it.
Yeah. And that goes back to what you said is the problem in a nutshell. And I've been saying this too on the campaign trail. Like, we lose when we see the Republicans take advantage of that we're afraid to stand up and be Democrats. So they keep us in a shell because they know our positions are popular. So they need us being quiet. So we have to break out of that. We have to go on offense because they always have us on defense. And when, people, I think, vote and get attracted to parties that are fighting because they can tell that party has values and that they're fighting for them. So there's a lot of people that we can convince. And what I've realized is the Republican Party has moved very far extreme to the right. And we have to remind people of that they're going way outside. So we have to label them as an extreme party for these positions that really aren't popular at all. And I think what you said earlier about holding them accountable, especially this year, like, we need a press release every single damn day against them.
I mean, I remember I was carrying a bill for the Humane Society to outlaw bestiality because basically what was the Texas thing? Is that Odensfeld was Texas with sodomy?
I can't remember.
So when the Supreme Court said that sodomy laws were basically illegal because they were targeting gay people, and that was kind of the pre-case before we got to gay marriage, in Louisiana, our statute had sodomy and bestiality inside the same statute. They were literally separated by a comma. And there was a legitimate question across the state of Louisiana whether bestiality was rendered illegal once the Supreme Court struck down sodomy. So the Humane Society of Louisiana, talking about the people who love pets, said, listen, we're in cases across the state where people charged with bestiality are claiming that the Supreme Court invalidating sodomy freed them up, and they have a legal argument because they struck down half of a constitutional provision in statute. So what they wanted was a clean new law saying that take bestiality away from sodomy, make bestiality illegal. Just bestiality is illegal. I had to fight through the entire legislature because you had right-wing conservatives led by Gene Mills saying that you had to keep bestiality and sodomy together because gay people are also into bestiality and all this kind of like crazy rhetoric. But the underlying thing was they were fighting to keep bestiality illegal. And fortunately, between social media and the rest, the wheels came off that train and I changed the law. But when that battle started and you saw how aggressively crazy these people were in saying that every gay person is the same as a dude who bangs a horse, why the party wasn't on top of Gene Mills in the Family Forum, tearing them limb from limb, talking about how they think it's okay that your neighbor have sex with his cat if it makes it harder for gay people to live in Louisiana. Like, these are gimmies. That's the kind of stuff that happened daily in the legislature. Party doesn't do anything. Party is just, they're so busy, I guess, counting their money and, I don't know, strategizing nothing. They just didn't do anything. And to your point, you don't even have to manufacture a press release a day. There will be a ridiculous, hysterical, extremist bill that comes up every single day in the legislature. Mm-hmm. And if we as a party are not putting on full blast everything the legislature is doing and making them own it, I mean, and I'll go one step further. We should not be letting Democrats do things that are Republican and letting them not own it. Exactly. And I say that because you have races where they target Mandy Landry because they don't like her. We have Democrats. I'll give you an example. Good friend of mine, Francis Thompson. Francis Thompson hasn't voted Democrat probably in 30 years. But because he knows people and he's high in the party's estimation, he's never been challenged on the fact that literally, whether it be gay marriage, whether it be abortion, let's put those two aside, whether it be anything like redistricting for a black district, he's no on all of it. He's like Joe Manchin on crack.
Yeah.
And the party gives him a pass, but Mandy, who can be a little abrasive, she has to be destroyed, and we have to waste resources to do it. You got Matt Cromer, who's in Plaquemines. We flipped that seat to a Democrat. The party fought the House caucus to try and remove a Democrat and a Republican seat. And because of that, we lost the seat. Because in the runoff, Democrats didn't turn out because we had D on D violence and the Republican won. I mean, it's nonsense. We just don't have we're rudderless. No, we're worse than rudderless. Rudderless would be better than, we're like if the captain turned into the iceberg in the Titanic. Like, you see the iceberg coming.
It's gotten even worse too, because politics has changed. You know, that's how politics happens. You know, slow and then it changes all at once. And we have to recognize that since Dobbs, and even going back, before that, from George Floyd, things have just changed. And we have to recognize that. And to me, it presents a good opportunity for us to rebuild this party, because we have to recognize that. And look, 65% in the primary didn't even show up to vote. You know, the Republicans got only 22% of the electorate in that primary. If you add up all the Republicans together, they only got 22% of the electorate's vote. There's a whole large amount of people that we need to go after, and we have to give them something to be excited about, not just Republican-like positions. Because if we're just Republican-light, well, they could either vote for Republican or just not vote at all, because it's not going to matter to them. So we have to figure out something that will energize, because, you know, I was frustrated too, because everybody's thinking, well, we got to get out the vote. We got to register more people. Look, we already have a lot of people registered and they're not even voting. You have to give people a reason to get off the couch and get excited or follow some politicians. And you have to talk about things that people care about, and in an exciting way. You have to have a bold plan for the future. You have to go right at the elephants in the room too, because a lot of Democrats are scared to talk about race. They're scared to talk about LGBTQ issues. We're just afraid to even go there, but you have to take some of these things head on. We're afraid to talk about poverty in the state. So if you don't talk about it, the Republicans are going to define you. And with race, I read a book a couple years ago called Merge Left. There was a lot of analysis done after Trump's election about how do we rebuild a supermajority for the Democratic Party, not just win by 52%, but how do we build a new supermajority? And one of the only things they tested all the typical Republican messages and all the typical Democratic messages. And Democrats usually rely on what they call colorblind populism, where we talk about economic issues where a lot of the people on the right agree with, but we don't address the elephant in the room, which is race, because Republicans use those race dog whistles to keep white people from voting for their interests economically. But the Democratic strategy has just been to ignore race, be colorblind, and not even mention the elephant in the room. And what they found is that that hurts the trust of the electorate. If we're not even talking about it, we don't win any. We don't win any of that trust that we need to gain their vote. But when we go about it head on and tell them that the Republican Party is using you, they're pitting you against Black people, they're pitting you against other working people in order to pick all of our pockets, that's a message that actually resonates. And they call it the race class narrative. And right. That's what I tried on the stump around the state in all white audiences. And I used the example of when I was in Avoyelles Parish. It's probably 90% white audience. And I stood up there and talked about that, how they're using the wealthiest people in the big corporations. They're giving them all the benefits, cutting your investments in your hometown, in your public schools, and your teachers. They're doing all this, and they're pitting us against each other so they can pick all of our pockets. And we need to unite, all of us working people, we need to unite and call this out. And whenever I got up there and talked about these messages, I had a number of white people that were Republican voters said, what you said up there, keep saying that. That is something we don't hear anymore. And they don't hear at all, especially coming from the Republican Party. You have to call out the strategy that the Republicans are using. Because again, these dog whistles are dog whistles for a reason. They're not overt. So we have to say what it is and tell people how they're being used.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, it goes back to Ronald Reagan with the welfare queens.
Right.
Basically, there is a method, and I'm not trying to go conspiracy theorist, and Monet's gonna have to put in a hook and virtually yank me out. But it's there has always been a tenor of fascism in the argument of other, in that if I portray someone else as other to unify everyone together, then we are all unified against that person. When Ronald Reagan started doing the dog whistle of welfare queen, that wasn't just about targeting Black people. It was about criminalizing being poor and blaming poverty on Black people.
Exactly.
If you look nationally, just by the numbers, there are as many, if not more, people on welfare and food stamps that are white than Black. But there is some criminal, evil mastermind shit and how Republicans get poor white people to look down on poor Black people and see them as other, versus we're both poor and these other rich people aren't paying their taxes. And that was the hive mind groupthink, because the policies like Joe Manchin's daughter running up the cost of insulin, the people that can't afford insulin are poor, white, Black, whatever. The fact that politicians use political dog whistles to distract you from the basic shit they're doing that's wrong, that is allowed to happen as long as you allow one segment of the political class to define what things we can consider. Today, we had a council meeting. We gave away $6 million. Not giveaway. We granted $6 million in city money to a variety of different groups doing resourcing to culture bearers, poor families, the like. The narrative, if you had Republicans, would be gave away $6 million of taxpayer money to a bunch of nonprofit welfare cream groups. The narrative that a Democrat would have was we gave away less than 1/10 the amount of money we spend to try and prevent people from ever going into a life of crime than we spent on the police department. That's the counter narrative. The problem we have as Democrats is rather than have the counter narrative that both answers that blocks the punch and counter punches, instead our party would fall over itself trying to explain, well, no, we didn't give that money to poor people. Like, we have to embrace as a party, we stand for things. We stand for the fact that we believe in protecting all people, regardless of what they're into or not into. And we believe that poverty is a sickness in this country that has to be be cured. What Republicans have done for decades, and your campaign went straight into it, is they've vilified the poor. They basically say you are poor because you choose to be poor. And if you could just pull yourself by your bootstraps, you wouldn't be poor anymore. And the reality is that most people get opportunity, and I'll take race out of it for 1 millisecond. If you're born poor, the likelihood you will stay poor is probably 90%. If you don't have access to a great education, job opportunities, if you aren't someone who is in the 1% of highly intellectual people with opportunities to escape poverty, you will remain poor without something intervening to give you an opportunity. What Republicans, especially the 1%, believe is, I'm rich, my kids will be rich. As long as their kids are rich, the world works. What Democrats believe is, it is not fair that because you were born poor, you must stay poor. It is not fair that the next Albert Einstein could be born in Section 8 housing and never develop the next theory of relativity because they never have the opportunity to do it. We believe if you are someone who could contribute to our society, we should give you the resource to do it. You may still never get to that level, but if you don't have the chance, we're just throwing people away. But we allow Republicans and people on that 1% to basically say, if you're born, it's like that Trevor Noah book that I love, Born a Crime. Being born poor is your own crime, and you've got to suffer with the sins of your family for generations. And if you're born poor, you're just going to be poor. And I'm okay with that because I'm rich and I'm wealthy.
But y'all, this has been going on. This is the strategy that goes back even to the plantation days. I mean, think about it. Like how did the South get so many poor white people to fight a war to protect billionaire plantation owners, basically?
Right.
We have to make the connection to a lot of the white people in the state, the white working people in the state, that there's still those plantation owners all around this state. I mean, if you look at who funds these Republican campaigns, I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars from just a few people, and all the big corporations that funnel money through the various PACs, and to get the big write-offs. I mean, millions and millions of dollars that could be coming into our local communities aren't, because the Republicans have been too busy giving too many giveaways and tax cuts at the top. And they're going all in on it now with this elimination of the income tax.
Pause right there, because we need to let's have a conversation about that. Because I think this probably should be the topic we end on, because from your background, I think you really need to explain to people the fugaboo that is this conversation about eliminating the income tax.
Yeah, so again, I have to go back to that Republicans have no economic policy. Because when you realize this, their only economic policy is the tax cuts. And it's not tax cuts for us. is tax cuts for just the few at the top. So if you notice, when they got rid of the Stelly plan, that's, again, it's always goes back to cutting at the top. And right now we're in a very regressively taxed state. So, we have a very poor population, 20% poverty. Another 20% or more is barely above poverty. And the majority of the taxes that get paid are on regular working people in the state. The people at the top pay less comparatively with their income and their wealth, especially. So, the Republicans, it's a constant ratchet down. Over time, they cut as much as they can at the top. Then that forces a budget crunch in our legislature. In that budget crunch, we end up cutting investments in people like health, education, access, infrastructure. When they can't cut it anymore and they need to raise revenue, what do? They raise revenue on working people through sales taxes. That's the only taxes that Republicans will ever consider. So right now, anytime there's a problem in our state, and the Republicans, they act like they're the party of economics or the party of money. They say, well, we got to cut more regulations, more taxes. And what tax do they consider cutting? The income tax, getting rid of the income tax completely. So that is the last tax that we have that actually reaches the upper echelon of the wealthy people in this state. We've already been knocking down the top tiers for a while.
To your point, and I had this conversation at a luncheon recently with some people who didn't agree with me, but then agreed with me. When Jindal first got in office, he said, "I want to get rid of the income tax. I want to be like Texas." And I am not a tax lawyer. I have no tax background, but I've been on money committees and I've learned over time how budgets function. And a bunch of us in the room were like, okay. He's like, yeah, okay. I was like, what are you going to raise? I'm like, what do you mean we're going to raise? I was like, well, in Texas, they don't have all the giveaways we have. They have ridiculously high property and use taxes. They don't, if you can get rid of income tax if you replace it with something else. You can't have none of both.
And they can't. That's 30% of our revenue comes from the income taxes, $5 billion a year. So what they never have an answer to how to replace it. No. So I'll tell you what they really want to do. They want to get rid of the income tax and then deal with it later. So dealing with it later means another budget crunch where they have a chance to cut education and health even more. But then they're not going to be able to cut enough anyway. So what they really want to do is go after the homestead exemption, which I
100% agree.
That's been their white whale for 100 years, and it's ended Republican campaigns throughout history. But that's what they really want. They always try to go. They're attacking it from the other door. So they want to go after the homestead exemption and get rid of that. And they're going to have to raise sales taxes and property taxes even more than that, because even that won't cover the shortfall. They don't have any plan for that.
The solution the early solution was we'll get rid of all the giveaways. What was hilarious to me, because I studied it, I think Kevin Pearson, who's a Republican, studied it. John Schroeder, the former treasurer, studied it. The math came back every time. You have to go raise another tax. And all the incentives we have, they exist, whether to promote economics or to promote giveaways. If you wiped all of them away, that'd be a start that generated $1 billion probably. What was very telling is you had Republicans saying, I want to get rid of the income tax. You had industry people saying, do not touch my giveaways, because I don't want to give up my giveaways as a corporation for you to get rid of income tax. So then the math started getting real funky, because that first $1 billion is the giveaways. That's the horizontal well drilling. That's all those different things. And the struggle that Jindal had, the death spiral, was that he kept talking about it. But to your point, as a party, a homestead exemption is the third goddamn rail of politics in Louisiana. How, as a party, are we not taking the homestead exemption and beating Republicans to death with it? If you told the most rural, I have voted Republican for 100 years person, that they want to take away your homestead exemption to tax your house that's worth 50 grand so that a millionaire could get out of paying their income tax, you would have a blue state.
And that's the message that Democrats need to have, instead of, oh no, we want to keep your taxes high, which is the position the Republicans.
That's exactly it.
You know what I mean? Like, we're the party of keeping your taxes, and they get to be the party of just the benefit of cutting an income tax. We have to use the messaging strategy of the Republicans are stealing your homestead exemption. They're coming after your homestead exemption. They're going to raise sales taxes on you. They're going to cut your public school funding.
And there is certainly Jeff Landry picking Nelson to be his Department of Revenue person, the person who was the biggest proponent. And to his credit, he spelled out how he was going to get rid of income tax, which was all the things we just said. They're coming for all that stuff. And if we as a party are not organized and ready to capitalize and explain to people what they're actually doing. Right now, for the first time in generations, we're not hemorrhaging every single teacher to a neighboring state. For the first time in generations, everyone mostly has health care who can get it. If we are not holding everyone's feet to the fire so that as we lose these things, we are not making them cinder blocks that we hang around the neck of the Republican Party, even as they propose it, what are we doing as a party?
Because they're gonna think if people's homestead exemption got taken away, if we don't have a functioning party, they're gonna think Biden did it.
Yep, and that'll literally be the message. They'll say Joe Biden, the Illuminati, the snake people, somebody stole your property. It wasn't us. If you don't have ads running in papers, bills up saying this HB 777 removes the homestead exemption, you will be taxed for your house. If it's not that simple and in bold, I mean, I remember, to be clear, Republicans in a lot of ways, when it comes to party manipulation, are genius. If you step out of line of the Republican Party for 5 seconds, they will destroy your entire career. Tanner McGee, very good friend of mine, voted Republican 99.9% of the time. A couple of times he was like, wait a second, that's crazy. That dude is a pariah in the Republican Party in Terrebonne right now. I mean, and everything in Terrebonne they have is because of Tanner McGee. All the money from John Bell, everything. Dude was pro tem of the House of Representatives, couldn't win an appellate court seat because Jeff Landry and co. said, you're not Republican enough.
I am also sad that Tanner McGee is no longer in the legislature at this point.
They eat their own. The Republican Party eats their own pretty voraciously.
They tried to eat Joe Stagney in Kenner.
Yeah, I mean, like, what it comes down to is like, we have let them grow unchecked. But I'm going to use some language that some of my listeners who are not from New Orleans will get. Rabid extremist Republicans are like the wild hog problem in Louisiana. If you are not constantly curtailing, challenging, and killing off crazed feral hogs, they basically run rampant and destroy everything in existence.
Mm-hmm.
We have let extremist Republicans define all of the politics in Louisiana, unchecked, unchallenged. And I include that as a criticism to our current governor. He didn't challenge them enough. Even when he challenged them, he didn't really challenge them. Like when I was there, first term John Bell trying to do minimum wage, I mean, he was for it. He was kind of for it. Like he was like, I'm sitting next to you for it, but did he make it like I will kill the budget over it kind of thing? No, it was a talking point. The problem is that when Democrats have talking points they don't give a crap about, voters can tell. They can tell that ERA amendment, which I got out of the Senate with pulling everything I could to possibly get it passed, everyone gave it lip service, but the Democratic Party and the governor didn't really try to pass it. They let me get it as far as I could I had the misfortune, well, misfortune. My youngest child was born when the thing was scheduled in committee. And ironically, Ronnie Johns, Republican, former Democrat, well, he carried it in committee for me. That's back when Republicans and Democrats talked to each other.
Yeah, that's
But
my former senator.
great guy, but probably definitely could not survive in this Republican Party. But those are issues where the party, even when it was for it as a state party, is lukewarm on all of it. And if we're not going to die on the vine for equal rights amendment, which is ridiculously popular, it's just saying you got to treat women equal. It's easy. If we're not going to die on the hill for a minimum wage, which is ridiculously popular statewide, if these are not issues, the party is going to say, this is what, if you're a Democrat and you vote against the minimum wage, you need to just change your party affiliation and walk out. Like, we have to be able to have these things that define us. Because if we don't, then not only do we not pass minimum wage, Republicans are going to blame your low wages on us anyway.
Yes, and like you said with the feral hogs, now look at our state. The Republican leadership in our state is the Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader of the House, and Scalise. We're talking about U.S.
Right.
And we have now a governor-elect that was considered by Trump to be the special counsel. Like, we have 3 individuals plus that were hands-on in the attempted coup of our nation, all from Louisiana, because literally our party is unable
we are fertile ground for raising up the most extremist Republicans possible. And to your point, this is what really, I want everyone to internalize this. We have a Speaker of the House. We have the Majority Leader in the House. Where's all the federal resources we should have when we control the levers of government? Because what is crazy to me is that everyone talks about, it used to be, for better or worse, that part of political power was trying to lift up the people in your area over everyone else.
Bring home the bacon.
Bring the bacon. Mm-hmm. Now we're at a point now where people just accumulate power just to have it. Like, they're not doing it to the, like whether you agree with someone's politics or not, the end goal was we all want everybody to live better. Nowadays, it's like people just want to be elected to just be elected. They just want to be a president of X or representative this or Senator Y, just because they want to be a senator or a rep, and they want to have a platform to say whatever things they say on Facebook. And there's no end goal as to what they are going to do at the end of their term, the end of their career, to say, I made people's lives better. I look at a lot of my colleagues right now being termed out this most recent cycle, and it's like, if you look at them and say, what did you do in 12 years that made your constituents' lives better? And the fact that many people I know can't point to something really tells you how far we've fallen in politics. Because there used to be legacy. And I mean, Monet knows, I say it to everybody else, if I had retired from politics after non-unanimous juries, I'd have been okay with that. Because I had something that was like, I did this thing that has changed the course of Louisiana for the better, and that's my legacy. But when I look at some of the people that I've served with that are there now, they don't have a legacy goal. They just want to be elected and be in power just for the sake of being in power. And it's just so incredibly sad and disheartening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what people notice. That's why people are checked out of politics, because they feel like the politicians are self-serving. Of course, I haven't been elected yet, so it's easier to say on the outside looking in. But yeah, I feel like if you're elected, you should fight like hell, even if it costs you from being elected again, to do what's right and help the people of the state or the people of your district. And now and that's the thing, we can stand for those things right now, because the Republicans don't stand for helping out their district or their state at all. just fighting the culture wars or whatever that's going on. Like the Republican Party doesn't believe in investing in people. They don't believe that the government should even exist. That's their entire philosophies. So again, you can't have any kind of economic policy if you don't believe in investing in infrastructure, if you don't believe in making sure people have health care. These are all economic issues, and these are all issues because what I've learned is the only way that our state will get better is if you invest in our most precious resource, which is people, is the human spirit. And whenever you're cutting everything, you can't ever grow out of it. More giveaways to the top and the big corporations and the industries and everything is not going to make anything better in this state. We've already proven that. So we're the party that stands for making sure your children have a good education, making sure your communities are invested in. You know, there's another book that was a follow-up to Merge Left. Heather McGhee, she was one of the co-authors of Merge Left, and she came out with a new book a year or two ago called The Sum of Us. And it goes through the whole history of civil rights and how we stopped public investment really since the 60s. It's been tapering off. And she uses the analogy of the drained swimming pool. Like back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s and 70s, we had public swimming pools. But now you won't find communities around the state or around the nation that have public swimming pools anymore. They've been all filled in, again, by Republicans that, again, race coming into it, that the reason we can't have nice things, the reason Louisiana doesn't have nice things in a good education system is because of the Republican Party being against all investment and cutting it out. We have to get people to understand that.
And Louisiana is in a very kind of special, horrible class because, I always joke with people, some of my most hardcore friends are huge LSU fans. Everyone loves LSU. LSU, purple and gold forever. When you look at what this state did to LSU, as far as it as a statewide, flagship university, we have cut and murdered LSU to the point where it's basically a football team. Football, women's basketball, gymnastics team. Sorry, those three.
Yeah.
And I say that because I remember the surreal moment where we're trying to figure out what to do with taxation, the sales tax, and John Milkovich, very much the epitome of not a Democrat, but had a D behind his name, and we all but exercised the party while he was there. He tried to tap the LSU endowment to pay off our bills. And people thought about it. And the argument I made, which you can appreciate, Dustin, is I got up there and they're like, yeah, we're going to go after LSU's, endowment. I said, yeah, Alabama has 6 times the endowment LSU does currently. And they're like, what now? And in that moment, they're comparing, wait a second, LSU has less than Alabama. And it was like, the competitive spark made it die, but they didn't realize the underlying message. There's a reason why when you go to Baton Rouge, there's more Alabama stickers on the back of cars than LSU stickers. And that's because even other southern states don't screw over their populations like Louisiana does. Even other southern states, when they're embracing the MAGA crazy, internally there's some governor being like, wait a second, we can't really defund our public universities. That's where the smart people who grow up to be employed people in our state are going to come from. And we have to create an environment where they'll stay here to invest in our state with lives, with families, with money. They understand this basic kind of the circle of economic life. I go through high school, college, vocational school, and I stay here. We've made it so unattractive to stay here, and we continue to do so, that even our most talented people leave to go somewhere else where they'll be valued. And I think a central component of your campaign, which resonated with me, I think resonates with many people, is if you're not willing to invest in Louisianians, why would they stay to invest here?
Right.
I mean, that's just
And that's actually what attracts, we always hear the Republicans say, well, we got to, attract outside businesses here. What attracts outside businesses here is a thriving community, a thriving population. That is why other businesses may move into our state. Because there's actually studies shown on the income tax that actually hurts other businesses from investing in our state, because they think, well, if they don't have an income tax, how are they paying for education? How are they dealing with poverty? We need people to work there, and we need people to buy things from us. How are they going to buy things from us if they're all poor? So our economy is exactly upside down. And the Republicans are going all in on this. Like Jindalism, people around the state hate Bobby Jindal. If you look at all the polls, he's still very unfavorable. But we've somehow let the Republicans not be tied to Jindal anymore whenever they're all trying to fulfill what he wanted of his legacy, which is elimination of the income tax. So it's one thing. So now you have the Wagaspacs and the Richard Nelsons being like the new hip people, but they're all just a version of Bobby Jindal on steroids.
No, you're right. Well, Monet, I think we need to start wrapping up. But what I will say is this: I think people who are listening to this, qualifying for DSC ends on Friday. I think it's important, whether you qualified or not, to be engaged and look at these platforms, because you need to elect people to the Democratic State Central Committee that are committed to doing something different. I'm not calling on a blanket like excising of all incumbents from the State Central Committee. But if you don't know who your member is and you don't know what they stand for, you should find that out, because we're getting to a point as a party where we have to decide, are we going to be a party or just be a collection of somewhat effective Democrats around the state separately that sometimes hang out together? Because it's one thing for people in New Orleans to fight for New Orleans, people in Lake Charles to fight for Lake Charles. We will never be successful unless we fight as a group. And that starts with the party. If nothing else, because not everyone can run, just pay attention to who's running and see if they support what you support or support a party being functional. And if there's someone that currently serves, question whether or not you think they're the right person. They might be the right person. They're great people I know on DSCC. But go figure out who they are and make a decision, because blindly voting for people over and over again is going to get you the same result, which is bad. That's my closing statement. You got anything, Dustin?
Yeah, I'm I'm optimistic. I'm an eternal optimist, but I'm also a realist. So I know that we're in tough times, and there's probably going to be more. But this is, crisis always meets opportunity. So to me, I see a huge opportunity. Whenever I was traveling around the state, there weren't giant crowds, but there was some pretty energized crowds. We have to tap in to the people that are here in the state that want change, and a lot of people do. And look, let's build a new party together. We can be everything that we want to be. Let's not sell ourselves short. Let's try to build this new Louisiana and turn this new chapter where we put a lot of our problems behind us. But we all have to work to do it, whether it takes 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, or 15 years. We all have to be in this for the long run. And I'll be here with y'all.
Well, thank you, Dustin. Appreciate it, Monet. Anything else? You good?
No, but thanks for coming, Dustin. I think it's been
Thank you so much. It's been
infinitely
fantastic.
illuminating talking to you. So
Awesome.
All
Thank
right.
y'all
Well,
so much for having me.
Thanks.
Oh, and tell anybody, follow me on social, grangerforlaw.com. Go to my website, grangerforlaw.com as well. And let's stay connected.
Definitely. Thank you, everyone.